Hachette Audio presents Banker to the Poor, Microlending in the Battle Against World Poverty, written by Muhammad Yunus, read by Ray Porter.
Introduction. In the year 1974, Bangladesh fell into the grip of famine. The university where I taught and served as head of the economics department was located in the southeastern extremity of the country, and at first we did not pay much attention to the newspaper stories of death and starvation in the remote villages of the north. But then skeleton-like people began showing up in the railway stations and bus stations of the capital, Dhaka. Soon, this trickle became a flood. Hungry people were everywhere. Often they sat so still that one could not be sure whether they were alive or dead. They all looked alike: men, women, children. Old people looked like children, and children looked like old people. The government opened gruel kitchens, but every new gruel kitchen ran out of rice. Newspaper reporters tried to warn the nation of the extent of the famine. Research institutions collected statistics on the sources and causes of the sudden migration to the cities. Religious organizations mobilized groups to pick up the dead bodies from the streets and bury them with the proper rites. But soon, the simple act of collecting the dead became a larger task than these groups were equipped to handle. The starving people did not chant any slogans. They did not demand anything from us well-fed city folk. They simply lay down very quietly on our doorsteps and waited to die. There are many ways for people to die, but somehow dying of starvation is the most unacceptable of all. It happens in slow motion. Second by second, the distance between life and death becomes smaller and smaller until the two are in such close proximity that one can hardly tell the difference. Like sleep, death by starvation happens so quietly, so inexorably, one does not even sense it happening. And all for lack of a handful of rice at each meal. In this world of plenty, a tiny baby who does not yet understand the mystery of the world is allowed to cry and finally fall asleep without the milk she needs to survive. The next day she may not have the strength to continue living. I used to feel a thrill at teaching my students the elegant economic theories that could supposedly cure societal problems of all types. But in 1974 I started to dread my own lectures. What good were all my complex theories when people were dying of starvation on the sidewalks and porches across from my lecture hall? My lessons were like the American movies where the good guys always win. But when I emerged from the comfort of the classroom, I was faced with the reality of the city streets. Here, good guys were mercilessly beaten and trampled. Daily life was getting worse, and the poor were growing even poorer. Nothing in the economic theories I taught reflected the life around me. How could I go on telling my students make-believe stories in the name of economics? I wanted to become a fugitive from academic life. I needed to run away from these theories and from my textbooks and discover the real-life economics of a poor person's existence. I was lucky that the village of Jobra happened to be close to the campus. In 1958, Field Marshal Ayub Khan, then President of Pakistan, had taken power in a military coup. Because of his fear of rebellious students, he decreed that all new universities be situated away from urban centers. His fear of political agitation meant that the new Chittagong University, where I was teaching, was built in a hilly section of the rural Chittagong district, next to Jobra village. The proximity of Jobra made it a perfect choice for my new course of study. I decided I would become a student all over again, and the people of Jobra would be my professors. I vowed to learn as much as possible about the village. Traditional universities had created an enormous distance between their students and the reality of everyday life in Bangladesh. Instead of traditional book learning, I wanted to teach my university students how to understand the life of one single poor person. When you hold the world in your palm and inspect it only from a bird's-eye view, you tend to become arrogant. You do not realize that things get blurred when seen from an enormous distance. I opted instead for the worm's eye view. I hoped that if I studied poverty at close range, I would understand it more keenly. My repeated trips to the villages around the Chittagong University campus led me to discoveries that were essential to establishing the Grameen Bank. The poor taught me an entirely new economics. I learned about the problems that they face from their own perspective. I tried a great number of things. Some worked, others did not. One that worked well was to offer people tiny loans for self-employment. These loans provided a starting point for cottage industries and other income-generating activities that used the skills the borrowers already had. I never imagined that my micro-lending program would be the basis for a nationwide bank for the poor serving 2.5 million people, or that it would be adapted in more than 100 countries spanning 5 continents. I was only trying to relieve my guilt and satisfy my desire to be useful to a few starving human beings. But it did not stop with a few people. Those who borrowed and survived would not let it, and after a while, neither would I. Chapter 1. Number 20, Boxer Hat Road, Chittagong. Chittagong, the largest port in Bangladesh, is a commercial city of 3 million people. I grew up on Boxer Hat Road in the heart of Chittagong's old business district. A busy one-way lane just wide enough for one truck to pass, Boxer Hat Road connected the river port of Chaktai to the central produce market. Our section of the road lay in Sonapoti, the jeweler's section. We lived at number 20, a small 2-story house with my father's jewelry shop workshop tucked beneath us on the ground floor. When I was a boy, my world was full of the noise and gasoline fumes of the street. Trucks and carts were forever blocking our road, and all day long I would hear drivers arguing, yelling, and blaring their horns. It was a sort of permanent carnival atmosphere. When towards midnight the calls of passing street vendors, jugglers, and beggars finally subsided, the sounds of hammering, filing, and polishing in my father's workshop took over. On the upper floor, we occupied just a kitchen and 4 rooms: mother's room, radio room, big room, and a dining room where a mat was spread out 3 times a day for our family meals. Our playground was the flat roof above, and when we got bored, we often idled away our time watching the customers downstairs or the gold artisans at work in the back room, or we would just look out at the endlessly changing street scenes. Number 20 Boxer Hat Road was my father's second business location in Chittagong. He had abandoned the first when it was damaged by a Japanese bomb. In 1943, the Japanese had invaded neighboring Burma and were threatening all of India. In Chittagong, however, the air battles were never intensive. Instead of bombs, the Japanese planes dropped mostly leaflets, which we loved to watch from the rooftop as they floated like butterflies down over the city. But when a wall of our second house was destroyed by a Japanese bomb, my father promptly shifted us to the safety of his family village, Bathua, where I had been born at the beginning of the war. Bathua is some 7 miles from Chittagong. My grandfather owned land there, and a major part of his income came from farming, but he gravitated toward the jewelry trade. Dula Mia, his eldest son, and my father also entered the jewelry business and soon became the foremost local manufacturer and seller of jewelry ornaments for Muslim customers. Father was a soft-hearted person. He rarely punished us, but he was strict about our need to study. He had 3 iron safes, each 4 feet high, built into the wall at the back of his store behind the counter. When the store was open for business, he left the safes open. With the insides of their heavy doors covered in mirrors and display racks, they appeared to be not safes at all, but
Sample complete. Ready to continue?